Serious, what's the creepiest / scariest thing you've seen but no one believes you? Didn't see it but heard it. My friends and I got a cheap set of walkie-talkies from Walmart and were playing around with them in the middle of the day. There's a bit of silence as we're trying to figure out the volume, and out of nowhere there's a male voice saying "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday" that comes through all of our walkie-talkies, and it definitely sounds like it from one of those aircraft headsets. We try to answer back but there's no response. I called non-emergency but they said there weren't any reports of distressed aircraft or ships, and even if there were, they couldn't do anything about it. Alternatively, a couple months later I saw a plane with an engine on fire go over my campus, but apparently no one else did. When I was 7 or 8, I would have a reoccurring nightmare that one of my dolls came to life, played with me, and then would try to pull me into my closet with her. I'd follow her into the closet at first, but then she'd show me this little door at the back of the closet, and my heart would start to race. I don't know what it was about that door, but I knew something bad would happen if I went through it. I'd start to struggle and try to pull away, but the doll was too strong and would start pulling me through the door. At this point in the dream, I'd always wake up screaming. The worst part was I had night terrors, so sometimes I'd wake up standing next to my closet. Every night before bed, I'd make my parents make sure there wasn't a little door at the back of my closet. There never was. Anyway, I was talking to my mom the other day and this dream came up. I'm laughing about it and how ridiculously paranoid I was about dolls in that closet. But my mom gets really quiet. She tells me the creepy part of that dream wasn't the doll, it was the fact that there used to be a little door at the back of the closet. But when I was 1 year old, they remodeled the house and put a wall where the door used to be. There's no way I could have remembered that door, but years later, I kept dreaming about it. None of my friends believe this story, but I swear it's true. I grew up on a 2-acre home with plenty of trees and room for an 8-year-old to run around. Our house also was heated in winter by a wood fireplace, so we would periodically cut down one of our own trees to save money. Well, for about 2 years, there was a stump less than a foot tall near the house, and at least once a day, without fail, I would see someone standing on the stump. Usually it was out of the corner of my eye, but once or twice I looked directly at him. I always looked away quickly, 'cause it startled me and he was gone. But my sister says she experienced the same thing. Nothing ever came of it though. Growing up, I had a friend named Adam. He was never able to come out during the day, only right before all of us kids had to go home for the evening. Adam lived a few houses over, in a house with an overgrown yard. I met his parents once. They were very strange, didn't smile, and obviously didn't want me there. I remember Adam telling me that he was sick, that's why he couldn't play that much. He was a small boy, pale with dark hair. Eventually, Adam stopped showing up altogether. And I eventually moved on, though I do remember going to his house a couple times to see if he could come play, and his dad just gave me this look before closing the door in my face. Later in life, I asked my sister if she remembered him. She doesn't, and according to my parents, that house was empty the entire time we lived there. I don't know who Adam was, I don't know why I so vividly remember him and his parents. As far as I can tell, he wasn't real, and yet I have perfect memories of him and his parents. Alright, buckle in. My neighbor was dying of a heart condition about 6 years ago. He knew he was, so he was giving away his valuables to people he trusted with them. Neighbor gave me his tackle box. He loved to fish. I would see him come home from fishing every day and he'd just sit on his porch and skin fish. I just put the tackle box in my closet and didn't really do anything with it since I don't fish. Anyways, soon after, he passed away in his home. Exactly a week after that, I woke up to the tackle box at the foot of my bed. Weird, but my stepdad likes to dick around, figured it was him, so I put it back. The next morning, I wake up, it's at the foot of my bed again. So, I asked my stepdad what the deal was, and he had no idea what I was talking about. To test this, I put the tackle box in a spot that he wouldn't find, nor would he attempt to get it. Under my bed, all the way in the back against the wall, and I put stuff in front of it to conceal it. Next morning, nothing. Okay, I guess it was him. Didn't give it much thought after that. 3 days pass, I wake up one morning and there it is, at the foot of my bed. Fuck. Now I'm starting to freak out. So I did what any rational person would and I went fishing with it. After I went fishing, I put the tackle box away, and it hasn't moved since then. It's still there. Just after high school, maybe 6 months or so after 9/11, I was a van driver who drove the Meals for Meals on Wheels to the place where they get packaged up and taken for home delivery. Anyway, the delivery van only had AM/FM radio and I was listening to 92.5 FM, when all of a sudden the station cuts out and a transmission that I can only describe as an American version of a numbers station began playing. It was seemingly random numbers followed by a long period of the same phrase repeated over and over again. The phrase was "they took the crosstown bus," over and over again. None of the other drivers heard it, but man was it creepy to hear. Eventually the regular radio station came back on and they never mentioned anything about it. This happened to me last year and I fully understand why no one believed me because it sounds ridiculous. Every morning, I need to wake up at 5 a.m. to get the 530 bus to the train station to go to university. I had to be there by 8 a.m., but I like to get there half an hour early. To get to the bus stop, I have to walk down this bike path and under this bridge to get to this quiet back street road. There is fuck all light on the bike path. This street is dead quiet. The right side of the road is a continuation of the bike path, and the left is a normal footpath with a long green hedge. One morning, I was standing there waiting for a bus and this old woman comes walking out from under the bridge. I didn't see her at first because, as I said, it was pitch black on the bike path. She crosses the road and walks up to me. She asked me if I knew where X road was. I turned to point in the direction of the road she was looking for. I turned back and she was gone. This old woman who was walking at a snail's pace disappeared within 3 seconds. The scariest thing I saw was at the age of 16. I woke up early in the morning 4:35ish am. Me and some friends were supposed to go on a road trip for the weekend. We had a long AF ride to one of the stops we wanted to visit, and didn't want to be there too late. I look out my window and it's still kinda dark outside. I walk downstairs and see wet footprints all over the house, and suddenly a big man like 6 feet 7 inches. I was around 6 feet 1 inch at the time just bolted past me and out the front door. Not really creepy, but I shat at least 5 bricks and bolted upstairs to my dad. Nothing got stolen, but things were scattered all over the house. This was 4 years ago. As I was walking on the sidewalk on a busy afternoon, I saw a suspicious boy/man about 18 yo. He was 10 meters away and walking what it looked like towards me. I kept my eyes on him despite the fact that he wasn't looking directly at me. His eyes were roaming, jumping from an object to an object. As we approached one another, half a meter away from each other, he takes out a knife and tries to stab me in my left side. He wasn't really fast, so I easily dodged it and immediately turned to see who is he, or if he is trying to stab me again. To my surprise, he continues walking and after a couple of meters he stops, turns around, smiles and gives me thumbs up, then he continues walking in the opposite direction. Till this day I don't know who he was, what he wanted, and even my family doesn't believe me, because if someone wanted to stab you, you can't stop him. You aren't experienced enough to dodge it like that in something of that kind. I woke up to something. It sounded like a door shutting. At first I thought it was a dream because I could hear it in the dream as I was waking up, kinda like when someone calls your name when you're dreaming. But then I looked at my cat. His hair was completely standing up and he was beaming at my bedroom door. This was the moment when I got really scared. I know animals can pick up on that shit and I thought he might know something's wrong. My cat doesn't do this type of thing unless a dog is in the room. So I looked over at the door and the only way I can describe it is it looked like it was swaying, slowly, like it was breathing, like someone was standing on the other side of it trying to hear if I was awake. This swaying was accompanied by a shadow. I don't mean a supernatural shadow, but it looked like the shadow of a person behind the door. I was paralyzed in fear. I lied there for 5 minutes naked watching this door away. I considered yelling and trying to scare them away, but I was terrified someone might respond. I legitimately thought this was the moment where I will have to defend myself or be killed. I don't own a gun, but after 10 minutes or so I mustered up the courage to check every room in the house. I fucking checked every corner too. But there was no one there. I don't know what happened, but my evolutionary traits kicked in and I completely believed someone was outside my door. The, accompanied by a shadow part was not a shadow figure, it was like the shadow you'd see if something was on the other side of a cracked door. I don't know if that makes the story less scary or what, but just wanted to be clear. This makes me sound fucking crazy, but anyways. It was a warm summer morning back when I was a kid. I was standing in our hallway, putting on my shoes when I randomly peeked into our living room and saw a see-through male figure surrounded by rainbow-colored lights standing right in the middle of the living room. He was reading a book and didn't seem to notice me. I thought it was weird, but I didn't feel scared or anything. It felt like the room was filled with a warm, loving energy, if that makes sense. I kinda just shrugged it off and went about my day, probably because I was too young to really understand what I'd seen. A few days later, when my mom tucked me into bed, she read me a bedtime story about a kid who meets an angel or something like that. Don't remember the story exactly, but what is interesting is the author's description of what that angel looked like. It was exactly the same as the strange rainbow man I had seen in our living room a couple of days before. It even said that angels will often visit humans surrounded by a strong, rainbow-colored lightning and manifest themselves while reading a book. I casually blurted out, "Oh, I've seen an angel then." And my mom was like, "You have? That's great." And we didn't talk more about that for a while, until one day where I randomly asked my mom if I could see a picture of my granddad who died unexpectedly while my mom was pregnant with me. She found an old family album and we looked through pictures of my parents' wedding that happened exactly 1 year before I was born. There was a picture of 3 or 4 people sitting together, laughing and having a great time at the party. I immediately pointed out the guy who sat in the middle and said, "How funny. He looks just like the angel I saw." And my mom's face turned white as a ghost. She was just about to tell me that this was indeed my deceased grandfather, who I never got to meet. I'm very convinced it was him visiting me. I spent one summer in high school living with my aunt and uncle and keeping their 7-year-old daughter for them during the day while they worked. I was up late one night watching TV in the living room. The living room was right off of the kitchen, separated only by an L-shaped bar. I saw my cousin, out of the corner of my eye, walk down the hallway from her room into the kitchen. It was way past her bedtime, so I told her she needed to go back to bed. When I didn't hear her answer, I got up and walked around the bar and into the kitchen. There was no one there. I checked under the bar to see if she was hiding from me, and there was no one there, and nowhere else she could have gone from the kitchen. I walked down the hallway to her room, and she was fast asleep, snoring, so there was no way it was her. It baffled me, and freaked me out, because if I didn't see my cousin, who was the little girl that walked into the kitchen? Several years later, I was talking to my aunt and she nonchalantly brings up the ghost in her house. I laughed it off and she said, "No, I'm serious. We have a ghost. Your uncle and I both have seen her and heard her. We call her Giggles, because we hear her giggling. We usually only see her in the hallway before she disappears." All of a sudden, I remembered the disappearing girl in the kitchen. I asked her what her ghost looked like. She said she had blonde hair with braids and wore a white dress. My cousin is blonde. On the night in question, I thought I'd seen my cousin in a nightgown walk down the hallway, but apparently it was the ghost that resides in my aunt's house. Fishing on Lake Minnewanka and Banff National Park with a good friend. About 50 feet from shore. Around 8:30 p.m. I see glowing red eyes. Up in the trees. Like Predator, I guess. I do a double take. They are gone. I decide not to say anything. Maybe I'm tripping. Did just smoke up? Nope. 5 minutes later my buddy says I just seen some glowing red eyes up in the top of those trees. I feel goosebumps. Yup, I saw them too. We look back and they are gone. We decide to aim the boat towards the shoreline. It's not dark yet but sun is going down. We saw nothing. No owls, no goats in the trails. We didn't get off the boat but we had a good look around. When I asked him about it, this was around 10 years ago, he just says he doesn't want to talk about it. I can't blame him. But after all these years I've never heard or seen anything like those glowing red eyes, 30 to 40 feet up in the trees, staring at us. I copied and pasted this next part. I knew nothing about the history when we went fishing there. For more than 100 centuries, people hunted and camped along the original shores of Lake Minnewanka. The Stony people called it Minnesota-Wauke, or Lake of the Spirits. They respected and feared this lake for its resident spirits. The early Europeans called it Devil's Lake. I used to go camping there. I do not anymore. Mostly because it's bear country for most of the summer. But yeah, also because of those bright red eyes. I will never forget that. Most surreal thing I've ever seen. I saw a panther-sized black cat darting out of a water retention/artificial forest near a school in the desert. Logically, it shouldn't be able to survive there, but holy shit, I saw it. Animal control wouldn't let that exist. There isn't really food enough for it, and the summers get dangerously hot if you've got black fur. Must have been 4 to 5 feet long. It doesn't make sense, but I 100% saw it, and so did the friend I was with. I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood, a few streets over. One night we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10 I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night. Uneventful trip. But when I got home, my roommate was coming out the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going into work at night. That's when he kind of laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone and sure enough, 5-something in the AM. My roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I'd just left. He groggily answered and confirmed I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't tired, no one could have slipped anything in either of the 2 Coors Lights I'd had, no known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. Not quite sure how young I was at the time, but it was probably between 5 to 8. I was in my babysitter bed at the time in her trailer park. It was 300 am. I had woken up because I had to pee. When I woke up I looked down the hallway to see my babysitter leaning against the wall like one of the stereotypical cool guys do in movies. And I made eye contact and I felt my body go cold because she was still sound asleep next to me in bed. I went under the blankets trying to hide, and when I looked back she was gone. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I've never told anyone. I just sat in her bed watching infomercials until 600 am when she woke up. Never even thought about sleeping there again. I honestly forget how much this affected me until I started writing this. Really freaked me out, man. 2 stories here, both about my grandma. Near the end my grandma had trouble controlling her bowels, wore a diaper and would typically go all over the toilet. After she passed in the house under professional care, my family cleaned out the house, took the wallpaper down, cleaned the place spotless, because we were going to move in the next month or 2. About a week after we finished cleaning we went back to make sure everything was good. We get to the bathroom my grandma used and there was literal shit everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, behind the shower curtain, literally the entire bathroom was essentially coated. Freaked me out because I knew it had to be my grandma, no burst pipes or anything wrong with the plumbing. Second story, we ended up moving in after the situation. My parents were out of town, so my brother and I had some friends over. We were in the basement playing Magic the Gathering when I went upstairs to grab everyone drinks. In line of sight from the fridge was the TV in our family room. Out of nowhere the TV turns on full volume to the show The Commissioner, which was my grandma's favorite show. She was also hard of hearing, so it being at full volume was normal for her. I freaked the fuck out and ran into the basement to get my brother. We go upstairs and the TV is off but the recliner is reclined. I shouldn't have been scared because it had to be my grandma, but we lived in that house a few more years and a few other things happened, but those 2 stick out to me because they were so close to when she died. I was walking to class from the dining hall on my campus when I saw a lady yelling for help and banging on a window of a nearby building. Lots of people were walking past but I was the only one who seemed to acknowledge it. I went to the window to help and she told me she was locked in a room in the building and that she needed me to come in and open the door. Now, I have no idea the layout of this building and where she was located. So I decided to call campus security for help despite her pleading with me not to call them and to just let her out. I call them and when I hear them coming I go to greet them so I can take them to the window. I leave for maybe a maximum of 15 seconds and when I return with campus security she is gone. We can't see her at the window and campus security goes inside to double check and sure enough there is no trace of her. Campus security definitely thought I was crazy, and I'm sure my professor thought I was full of shit when I explained to him why I was late. No one seems to believe me that this happened, but I swear it did. Facts: I am female / it is a very old campus with lots of random historic buildings that people don't really use, and this building was one of them / the area has a very high crime rate, so it probably was a robbery. Ooh. I have a story. My husband and BF and I were laying on his trampoline one night looking up at the stars and shit when all of a sudden a chunk of the sky starts moving / billowing. It looked like a green screen shifting, and had to be a few miles wide. We both saw it and still have no fucking idea what it could have been. Okay, so I was flicking through these and told my girlfriend about one, and she hit me up with these stories. Just some background: she is a dedicated science brain and not superstitious at all. When she was growing up, 4 to 15 years of age, she would often wake up in the middle of a disturbed sleep to see an old woman perched at the end of her bed. This woman was not someone that she recognized. The old lady would soothe her back to sleep, often patting her feet at the end of her bed. The strange thing about this is her sister, a few years older, also had similar experiences seeing the old lady. They both shared a room, but would see her at different times. We doubt very much it was someone coming into their rooms at night. Both her and the sister also recalled seeing a man popping his head out from behind their tall kitchen cupboard, smiling and then going back behind it. Turns out that from his description, the family believed it was a neighbor who passed away and used to play hide and seek with them and his children. Personally, I've never experienced anything supernatural. Found reading this thread and talking to her about it very interesting. Edit: thanks for all the votes and comments. One of my first big posts on Reddit. Great seeing the love. We both woke up all giddy. My GF divulged further that the house they lived in used to be owned by an elderly woman who kept it super clean and was a very caring member of the community. Apparently she died 3 days after they signed the lease.